So to begin now, I am really delighted to welcome Dr. Luca Olivieri, who has been the director of the Italian Archaeological Mission in Pakistan since 2013. He has worked in Pakistan since 1987 on the urban site of Barikot, the ancient Bazira of Alexander the Great. And he's focused on the rock art field research and also the archaeological map of the Swat Valley, amongst many other things I hasten to add. In 2016, he was awarded the title of Sitara al-Imtiaz by the President of Pakistan for his services to archaeology. And in 2017, he was awarded the Order of the Star of Italy, which was presented to him by the President of the Italian Republic. He has published extensively on South and Central Asian archaeology and is a member of the editorial boards of numerous journals and has done many, many other things I also should add. But I think on that note, we should hand over to Dr. Olivieri and listen to what he has to say on the temples of Swat. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Alison, and a very good evening to everyone. I hope my voice is arrives to you clear. Mm-hmm. It is perfect. So a very good evening to everyone, and many thanks for inviting me, and many thanks to all of you who have joined this talk today. My thanks, of course, go to the Royal Asiatic Society and to Alison, to you, and to all the individuals who are behind the organization of this conference series. Now, I would like to start with a brief introduction to the topic of this talk, a monumental phase of Hindu architecture from the 8th to the 14th century, which is almost coeval to the medieval Brahmi Sharada inscriptions associated with this architecture to the Shahi dynasty and later dynasties, was documented from the late 19th century in and around Gandhara, on the banks of the Indus River and on the cliffs of the Salt Range. Archaeological evidence was also documented in eastern Afghanistan from the 1930s to the early 70s of the last century. After the 1950s, excavations at the Shahi forts of Udegram and Zalamkot, both in Swat, marked a new beginning for these studies in Pakistan, which culminated with the discovery of a large Shahi temple at Barikot in Swat in 1998. And this temple will be the focus of our talk today. The architecture of this period has recently attracted renewed interest in Pakistan following the project led by Michael Meister and Abdur Rahman on the Indus and Salt Range temples belonging to the so-called Nagara Gandhara architectural style. More recently, Deborah Klimburg-Salter at the University of Vienna, in partnership with Michael Alram, and other specialists, including Adam Hardy, has launched the project on the Shahi dynasties and cultural material. And very recently, at the end of 2020, an important book on the Bannu Archaeological project, which includes also a very important description of the Shahi phases, was published by the British archaeologist Cameron Petrie. Now, let's now introduce the key site of this talk. Barikot, the ancient Bazira or Beira of Arrian and Curtius Rufus, the city sieged by Alexander the Great in late summer 327 BCE, has been a major digging project of the Italian Archaeological Mission in Pakistan since 1984. The site features an ancient settlement with a complex multi-phase stratigraphy from Bronze Age, 2nd millennium BCE, to the medieval times. Important are the phases associated with the second urbanization phase in mid-first millennium BCE, when a city actually was founded at the site. And also important is the Indo-Greek urban fortification, which is dated to the around 150 BCE. And then it's a very important site, very complex. I don't want to waste your time to describe, but we will talk about that maybe later on. The abandonment of the city occurred during the Kushano-Sasanian times, at the beginning of the 4th century, end of the 3rd century, beginning of the 4th century CE, following a series of destructive earthquakes. Now we go in a phase of the structural sequence which are extremely less clear. Between 700 and 1000 CE, so in the late historic period, or late ancient period, Barikot became a major Shahi center with a palatial and cultic, structures. At that time, the city, earlier known as Bazira or Bazira or Beira, according to the Latin and Greek sources, is mentioned as Vajra Sthana, the Sthana, the place of the Vajra, in a Brahmi Sharada inscription, which was found by Harold Deane at the place, at Barikot, in 1896, and now in the Lahore Museum, which is dated, the inscription is dated to the reign of the Shahi king Jayapaladeva, 964, beginning of the 11th century. Amongst the material remains is also a large Hindu temple constructed on a monumental terrace previously built for a Buddhist sacred area. According to the archaeological evidence, the temple was built during the early Shahi phase, during the Turkish Shahi phase, around 700 CE, and further enlarged under the later dynasty of the Hindu Shahi, around 850. It was demolished after a Ghaznavid military settlement or installation was established at the site in the 11th century. The archaeological evidence hints at a complex religious stratigraphy where Hindu elements overlap the Buddhist ones, but both survive to the later Islamic phase. Initial excavations started in 1998 and were later resumed in 2019 and are still going on. The main temple has been almost completely exposed, with a large portion of the upper citadel. In addition to the excavation, surface documentation led to the location of 3 more Hindu temples, all belonging to the Shahi cultural phase. One temple was documented at Zalamkot. You can see there in this place, exactly south of the Swat Valley, but is still in Swat, in the southern part, I mean, of the Swat Valley, at the gates of the Swat Valley, along an ancient road, very important ancient road, which is known as one of the so-called Buddhist roads mentioned by Alfred Foucher, for example. A second temple was reported very close to Barikot at Maniar here, and a third one in the Talash Valley on the way to Dir and to Afghanistan. The existence of more temples can be hypothesized from sporadic findings of architectural pieces throughout the entire area. But we have to consider also that Shahi temples were part of a vaster and more complex landscape that includes a series of outstanding ruins of palaces, castles, and watchtowers, all belonging to the late Hindu Shahi period, which were also documented but only partly excavated in the surrounding territory. And these are all other images of these wonderful military structures. The sudden emergence of a Hindu architecture monumental architecture in Swat and Gandhara may give the impression of a radical cultural change, which is a fact which, by the way, represents only a part of the real picture. From the Chinese pilgrim Xuanzang's writings, scholars know that there were Deva or Hindu temples in and around Gandhara in the early 7th century CE. At the time of Xuanzang's visit, there were 10 Deva temples and a large number of shrines of other cults in Kapisha, which is located a little bit northeast of Kabul, where is currently located the city of Begram. Xuanzang speaks also of Deva temples in Lagman, a little bit to the southeast of Kabul, and 5 temples in Nangarhar, which is on the Afghan side of the Khyber Pass, and more than 100 temples, Deva temples in Gandhara. However, in none of the archaeologically known Hindu temples of the region have phases earlier than or coeval to Xuanzang been documented so far. While earlier dates are, for example, have been hypothesized in the past, for instance, for the temple of Khair Khana, which is located near Kabul, which was excavated by the Hakim in 1930s. So far, the earliest absolute dates obtained from a Hindu temple in the region was the one obtained at Barikot, late 7th, early 8th century of the current era. Now, we don't know whether the archaeologically documented temples, the very few which we know, are later constructions on the very sites which were described in a slightly earlier time by Xuanzang. Xuanzang gives us no detail at all about the form and the structure of these ancient temples. However, and that's the most important part of the story, according to him, a large part of the population from Kapisha, so from Begram to Gandhara, belonged to the heretical schools, whether they were Hindic or local. Now, this information, the information provided by Xuanzang and other sources, when put in a diachronic context, would suggest, would give the impression that the appearance of the Deva temples is somehow linked to the decline of Buddhism in the 7th century CE, which is partly true. I think, in fact, that this impression as a generalization is incorrect. The archaeological record, not for the decline of Buddhism, as far as I'm talking about from the Hindu religious point of view. I think this is, as a generalization, is incorrect because the archaeological record clearly shows the existence of a Hindu substratum well before the phase of monumentalization of the cult that started under the Turkish Shahi dynasty. In a previous work focusing on the non-Buddhist groups of ancient Swat, I have discussed, for example, the features of these communities in the first centuries of the Common Era, that they did not leave evidence of any structured cult, unlike the Buddhists. In the Gandhara archaeological record, there are, although, numerous important Hindu sculptural pieces, but also a deluge of minor objects, like, for example, votive tanks, terracotta figurines, terracotta plaques, as well as, in this case, Hindu representations in some painted shelters. Another example is that of the seals from Gandhara, an agate ring bezel in the holdings of the British Museum with a 4-armed Vishnu and a Bhaktya inscription, and the representation of a princely devotee is dated to the 4th, 5th century CE, is amongst probably the most communicative object in this regard. And coming to the sculptural material, the Peshawar Museum has in its collection a small late Gandhara stele, which is pictured here on the left, which is dated 3rd to 4th century CE from a kunderi, which is not far from Shaikanderi Charsadda in the lower Swat Valley region, outside the Swat Valley, along the course of the Swat Valley, immediately before the point where the Swat River joins the Kabul River. So we are talking of an area which lays in the plain, not very far from Peshawar, a little bit northeast from Peshawar. And this stele, which is very small, 17 centimeters only, shows a multi-armed figure of Shiva standing in front of a bull, facing proper left. And the figures bear a close resemblance to those on the coins, for example, of Vima Kadphises, and so on. Amongst the later production, 5th to 7th century, the most extraordinary work of the art in this respect is certainly the inscribed bronze mask of a Hindu god, Shiva or Brahma, found near Peshawar before 1834 and now in the Bibliothèque Nationale in Paris. It is clear that Hinduism was widely practiced, both amongst the elites and in the lower strata of the population, surfacing also through the local substratum. For example, the so-called Daradas or Daradas, the local population, living in the mountains, which are mentioned, for example, in the Manuvadharma Shastra, as revealed also in the painted shelters, in the imagery of the painted shelters. It happened thus that to the archaeologist's eye, vis-a-vis the overwhelming dominance of Buddhism in Gandhara, the evidence of the Hindu substratum practically disappears. The, I would say, misunderstood immateriality of the others make them akin to extras in a movie set. The status and the role of the non-Buddhists, before some of them started leaving monumental traces, is almost ignored by archaeologists. That moment, the moment when the Hindus started building monumental structures, came when the Turkish Shahi kings and their local allies began patronizing monumental Hindu architecture and related artwork. Between the reigns of Khorasan Tegin Shah and his grandson Timgala in the late 7th, early 8th century CE. From then onwards, Hindu temples started dominating the Indus Kabul landscape from Kabul city to the Salt Range. Now, Xuanzang reported the existence of 10 Hindu temples in Swat. However, archaeologists had to wait until 1998 when a monumental podium was discovered on the summit, on the top hill of Barikot, before fully confirming the presence of temples in Swat proper, in the Swat Valley, I mean. However, relevant pieces of information had already been identified in the reports of the early protagonists of the archaeology of the frontier, Harold Deane, Alfred Foucher, and Aurel Stein. The earliest information was collected and published by Harold Deane, who spoke of the antiquities nearby Shingardar or Manyar, little bit to the north of Barikot. Later survey carried out in this area revealed late antique ruins as well as several rock carvings representing Hindu deities, including Surya, Ganesha, and Vishnu. Other evidence was documented on the opposite spur of Tindodag inside the cave, significantly known as Hindugar, the rock of the Hindu, the cave of the Hindu, sorry, where a second image with Surya and Ganesha was found. The archaeological evidence of Manyar and its connection with Barikot have been discussed elsewhere and associated by Anna Filigenzi in a very seminal article which was published in the journal East and West in 2006 with the potential dynastic religious complex of the Turkish Shahi time. Deane located a second temple, a cave temple, at Kashmir's mast, where 4 majestic pieces of the wooden heart of the Shahis, now at the British Museum, were found by Deane himself or by his agents. The site has been associated with the Hindu sanctuary described by Xuanzang. The site was later excavated and studied by Professor Nasim Khan, and whoever is interested on this site can refer to his publication. Leaving Kashmir's mast and going up, coming back to Swat, heading north to Swat, we encounter 2 roads, 2 parallel roads, climbing the Shahkot Pass, which is a natural access to the Swat Valley. The lowermost of the passes connecting the plain of Gandhara with the islands of Swat. One of the 2 roads, which is located on the western side, is still known as Hatilar, the Elephant's Road. Ascending in sharp zigzags to the top of the pass, it descends down in the same fashion on the other side, past the village of Zalamkot and reaching the Swat Valley near the major town of Tana. On the Swat side of the Hatilar, which is one of the Buddhist roads mentioned by Alfred Foucher, are the remains which were first noticed by Alfred Foucher of a 3rd temple, which is known as Takht or the Takht, the throne of Zalamkot. And this is other images of the same site. The throne and the Hatilar, the road. This is a very important, one with the very few traces of ancient road infrastructures in Swat, in Gandhara as well. Lastly, Deane includes in his notes the existence of a 4th temple in the side valley of Talash, which is on the western side of Swat, on the way to Afghanistan. A very important topographic connector that links Kunar, which means Afghanistan, the lower Chitral or Kunar Valley, to Swat and the lower districts. When Stein saw the temple first in 1897, part of the wall decoration was still visible. By the time of his 2nd passage through Deir, leading at the beginning of his, I think was the 2nd Central Asian expedition, the temple in 1906, the temple was almost totally plundered, and today it does not exist anymore. Luckily, part of the decoration, as you can see in the photograph pictured at your right, part of the decoration was recently found by some of my Pakistani colleagues, re-employed in the early 20th century graveyards of the nearby Islamic cemetery of Ziyarat. Now, besides the temples described above, we can add to the list 4 other sites where revealing elements have been documented. In the Talash Valley of Deir, just opposite of Gumbat, there is another place which is called Gumbatuna, or locally called Stargomane, which means the Palace of the Ice, which is a palatial and fortified site discovered by Professor Abdur Rahman, and where major elements of potential elements are related to a Hindu temple of the Shahi time were also discovered. For example, an Amalaka stone, which was topping the Latina elevation. Other stones of the same time were documented by the archaeologists in other places, for example, at Udegram. Udegram is a very important site for the history, the archaeology of the Swat Valley. At Udegram, you see an Amalaka stone reused as a pillar was documented by the archaeologists in the prayer hall of the Udegram Ghaznavid Mosque on the Mount Rajagira nearby Udegram in Swat. From this site also came a dedicatory inscription written in Arabic related to a 2nd phase of the same Ghaznavid Mosque, which is dated to 1044 or 1044, if you prefer, which is carved, by the way, on the rear side of a wonderful Shahi marble method with representing a full-blown lotus. Another Amalaka stone was found in Barikot, and other in association to, as we will see, with other materials related to a potential, a second temple in Barikot as well. Now, at this point, it's time to zoom in on the Barikot archaeological area. Now, before starting dealing directly with the problematics and issues related to the late stratigraphy of the site, at the same time, I would like also to consider very briefly a methodological issue, which is very important for field archaeologists. Now, archaeology still, especially in Oriental archaeology, still is inclined more towards positive evidence, materials, and therefore can miss the importance of the so-called interfacial periods, for example, the periods of abandonment of a site. Although these interfacial or interphase are extremely ambiguous and extremely difficult to be interpreted, are extremely crucial for the periodization or the reconstruction of any cultural sequence. In this sense, it is very important to share with you that we have, as archaeologists, we have noticed that at Barikot, we know it's a complete sequence, so a gap in that sequence, it's really something, but also in other sites throughout Swat and Gandhara, and I would say the northwest of ancient India in general, or generally speaking. In this sense, it's very important, there is a very important gap in the sequence between 500 and 700 CE, which is elsewhere documented practically. The gap, the negative evidence is documented, sorry for the, but it is documented throughout the entire, throughout the archaeology of the region. And this is the period in which the decline of abandonment of the Buddhist monasteries started occurring. Now, so the only positive evidence we have is the negative ones. So absence of stratigraphic, absence of thinnering of the stratigraphy on one side, or abandonment of monasteries, Buddhist monasteries and Buddhist sanctuaries. The reason for that phenomenon the reasons are currently under study, but probably can be potentially associated to natural causes, such as, for example, climatic changes. Currently, we are studying the potential impact of the so-called Lalia, late ancient Little Ice Age, or late antique Little Ice Age, which hit the entire Eurasia between 530 and 660 CE. Which might have had a very strong impact on the agrarian colonies of Swat, which we know were under the control of the Buddhist communities. Say that, now we move to Barikot. So far, the only few traces of structures belonging to the late antique or medieval settlement, 5th to 14th century, were found on the southern foot of the hill and on the top of the hill of Barikot, which was the ancient Acropolis at the time of the Indo-Greeks. On the top of the hill, which was the ancient Acropolis, as I said, we found and excavated a Hindu temple. These are views taken with a drone of the Acropolis of Barikot. And this is a small video. I don't know if you can see it. Just a clip. When we started the excavation there in early 1998, in August 1998, it was extremely hot. We were expecting to find and uncover a stupa, whose existence was guessed there by Aurel Stein. To our great surprise, we discovered that the low mound on the top of the hill hid not a stupa, but a major Hindu temple, 21 meters long, 14 meters wide, which was accessible from the east by a stairway. The subsequent seasons revealed important fragments of the original decoration of the temple, including a marble Ghaznavids, which is pictured here at the right, from a lost life-size Vaishnava group. We will talk about that later. The elevation of the podium preserves a thick torus, as you can see, a thick torus plinth with a partition of pilasters. It was built in stone masonry with all the molded parts in stuccoed limestone, locally known as kanjur. Most of this architectural elaboration is lost, but there is enough to visualize the magnificence of the original architecture. The pilasters of the podium, beautifully decorated. Here I'm comparing some of the pilasters fragments found at Barikot with some of the evidence preserved at Zalamkot, which was the first of the temples that I show you, which is located along the Hatilar, along the Elephant's Road. The pilasters of the podium, beautifully decorated with, as you can see here, with central vertical frames, were surmounted by hybrid capitals topped by modillions, and the ending, as at Zalamkot, with volutes. The upper cornice probably featured rows of cima reversa face bracket, which is typical also of the Gandhara architecture, which further endorsed Michael Meister's view that the so-called Nagara Gandhara architectural style depended very much on the Gandhara Buddhist antecedents. Now, the central shrine at Barikot, where the cultic group stood, the cella practically, the elevation is completely lost and can be reconstructed only on the basis of indirect comparisons. The decoration of the temple was extremely rich. Stuccoed metopes with full-blossomed flowers, elaborate vegetal capitals, grotesque animal protons. Recently, the excavation of the monument gave us, when we started the excavation in 2019, we never stopped the excavation of Barikot. We moved from one area to another area. So we came back to the Acropolis only in 2019, practically 20 years after the last campaign was carried out at the site. I mean, on the top of the Acropolis. Now, that's one of the most interesting things is that from recently the excavation gave a very important series of information. The first one is chronology. Now you can see at the bottom rows of this chart, from the radiocarbon dating of the organic materials collected during the excavations in 2019, we got a very important calibrated date which links the first living phase of the temple to the late 7th, early 8th century CE, which means to the Turkish Shahi phase. And this phase, by the way, confirms the earlier non-calibrated date from a sample collected from the same layers. This chronology matches, by the way, also the tentative dating of the Shahi temples found in north of Kabul by the Japanese mission at Tepeskandar, which was dated to the 7th century by the leader of one of the leading archaeologists of the Japanese team, which was Soshin Kuwayama. Now, the second point regards the foundation of the temple. Now, it is clear that the temple is built upon a terraced structure. No? You see that I will show you another video just to give you the impression of how magnificent and impressive is the site. Okay, done. But now this artificial terrace was built for the temple or no? Was not built for the temple. It predates the temple. It is demonstrated by many discoveries, including the southern gates. And we are not talking to this, is too much technical. But the most important thing is that it is likely that the temple was erected upon a monumental terrace, which was initially constructed for Buddhist stupas. The temple, in fact, as you can see in this image, was actually built over some stupas which were raised down, the debris leveled, and a new floor was laid, and on top of that floor was built the temple. We do not have any absolute date for these stupas, but they might have been quite old, 1st to 4th century, considering the architectural features of the substruction, as well as the various Gandharan pieces which has been found on the top of the hill. Now, we don't know whether the stupas were already in ruins or were intentionally destroyed at the moment when the temple was built. I mean, with the established chronology, late 7th, beginning of the 8th century, that established a chronology for the foundation, for the construction of the temple, of the Turkish Shahi temple on the top of the Barikot hill, overlaps practically the chronology of another class of material, which is very well known in Swat, but especially not particularly in the area of Barikot, but especially in the upper part of the Swat Valley, which are the so-called late Buddhist rock carvings or rock sculptures, which are perfectly dated by many elements, including their, I would say, their connection with the features of the style of the palatial bronzes, which are perfectly dated by dated inscriptions. There were two rock carvings at the foot of the hill of Barikot. One is, I'm not presenting these two carvings here because they are not were not found in good conditions, very much decayed or almost defaced. Anyhow, these two carvings which were found, one on the north side, one on the south side of the hill, along the two roads leading up to the top. One representing two Padmapani, bodhisattvas, Padmapani, bearing the lotus flower, and the Buddha in meditation. And the second represents a Padmapani and a standing Maitreya. So very, very clear, late Buddhist, early Vajrayana, I would say, iconography. As I told you, both belong to the well-studied class of late Buddhist rock sculptures, typical of Upper Swat, whose chronology is very well fixed, also on the basis of the stylistically correlated palatial bronzes. Such sculpture, that's important, are always located. We found more than 200, 220 of these sculptures. These were published by Anna Filigenzi and me in a monographic study in 2015, the complete catalog of these late ancient Buddhist rock sculptures. Are always located on the road, on the way leading to the major surviving, I would say, Buddhist sanctuary at that time. However, by the time of the carving of this sculpture, there were no Buddhist remains on the top of the hill of Barikot. Though the site might have preserved its sacredness, and we should remember that the site is called Vajira. The name of the site, Vajrastana, Bazira, Beira, is the same thing, as we will see. Is the location of the site is connected to the symbol and the name and the sacredness of the Vajira. We have also evidence of Buddhist pilgrimage at that very site, as we will see, which is attested even in later phases, during the Islamic time, when the Hindu temple was destroyed, razed down. Now, one should be aware of one very important point: what Buddhist site means in these late periods. Now, evidence for coeval phases of the Swat excavated Buddhist sites, for example, Butkara 1, Shanesha, or Amluktara, in this case is Amluktara pictured in this slide, is extremely revealing from my point of view. These three sites, Butkara, Shanesha, and Amluktara, which is pictured here, feature late Buddhist rock sculptures in nearby the area. But during the 7th century, for example, all these sites, although functioning, were in extremely poor condition, with shabby structures built around the almost buried, crumbled, or poorly repaired stupas. The surviving earlier stone and stucco decoration were occasionally re-employed for cultic purposes, but removed from the original context. Overall, the evidence seems to point to a very unstructured organization of Buddhism, where we have small communities of wandering or isolated siddhas. Only at Mangalore, which is in Upper Swat, in the very same time, Mangalore was the capital of Indrabhuti, a very important king for the Tibetan tradition, because he was the master of Guru Rinpoche, Padmasambhava, the person, the Siddha who brought Buddhism to Tibet and Bhutan. So only at Mangalore in Upper Swat, located approximately 50 kilometers north of Barikot, there is evidence of a structured complex, certainly a major teaching center, dominated by colossal Buddha, the largest of the late Buddhist rock sculptures of Swat. This colossal Buddha became famous in 2007 because he was intentionally destroyed by the Taliban and later restored by our mission. Now, another important point regards the discovery on the very top of the hill above the temple of a huge water tank on the very top of the Acropolis, as we said. In this location, in pre-Shahi phases, there was a strong, this is images of the last October 2020 excavations on the top of the very top of the hill. In this location, in the pre-Shahi phases, there was a strong terraced complex coeval to the Buddhist temple, a Buddhist complex below. But the Shahi intervention was extremely invasive. All the elevated parts of the previous structures were raised down to the floor level to make space for the new water tank, as well as they did for the stupas on the terrace below. At the end of the temple's life, in the first decades of the 11th century, under the Ghaznavids, a small watchtower was built, military watchtower was built, and the water tank and the precinct around the water tank was partly restructured and partly used as a waste area, disposal area. While the water tank, although not cleaned regularly, as it was earlier, of course, remained functional until it was fully silted over. And the point was abandoned, I think, during the 11th century CE. Okay. Mention of abandonment of the water tank, which was built for the temple, of course, during the Shahi time, allows me to introduce another point which concerns the abandonment and spoliation of the temple. Again, the problem of abandonment, phases of abandonment, the importance of phases of abandonment. It's extremely important to know, to understand how a site is spoliated, for example. Now, for example, there was a question there. Where were the remains of the collapsed architecture? We are on the top of a hill. So there is no possibility, for example, that the bulldozer has leveled the ruins. No way. The excavation around the temple revealed the entire structure was dismantled, and let me put it in another way, sorry. The most striking evidence for an archaeologist, for me, I'm a field archaeologist mostly, but basically, and I'm proud of that, the most striking evidence at the site is the total absence of debris, either on the top of the structure or at the basis of the terraces. And the monument was certainly higher than 12 meters, including the podium. And the preserved part of the monument is 2 meters high. And it can be easily exposed by simply scratching the surface. So where were the debris? We found that around the temple, the excavation around the temple revealed that the entire structure, which was made of, I repeat again, in limestone, stucco, wood, and marble pieces, was eventually dismantled and burned to obtain pure lime. The whole area was transformed into a lime kiln, which left thick accumulations of burned limestone and stucco mixed with nodules of lime, all sealed on the top by layers of charcoals and ash. Amongst the debris, we found, this is the point, that amongst the debris, we found the fragments of the marble statues, which, despite their beauty and sacredness, of course, for someone else, were treated just as a source of lime. In the same lime kiln, a large quantity of wooden parts and iron elements were also found. Elements of hardware were also found. These are certainly part of the elevation of the shrine, which would have had large parts made in wood. These 6 fragments of wood, now you have to look at the other rows, at the upper rows. 6 fragments of wood were radiocarbon dated and gave an average date between 880 and 1200 CE. These dates prove that the woodwork of the shrine was dismantled and used as a fuel for the kiln. Woodwork, by the way, it's extremely important in Shahi architecture, as demonstrated by the wooden architectural pieces found now in the British Museum, which were found by Harold Deane at Kashmir's Mast. Now, for a moment, we are leaving the top of the Acropolis and we are going down on the southern side of the hill. At Barikot, still, on the southern flank of the Acropolis, a second temple was discovered, partly coeval to the temple on the top, but with features which are completely different from the latter. It's a very, I'll show you first this, okay. Look at the image on the picture on at your right. It's a very simple rated square structure with cylindrical corner buttresses. Inside there is a small courtyard with 4 columns and a fireplace right at the center. The new dig revealed that the temple was part of a larger palace and dated to the Hindu Shahi time. This is why I'm saying this temple is partly coeval. So was built a little bit later during the life of the other temple, which is what it was on the top of the hill, but was built in a later moment. In fact, if you look at the chart at the bottom of this slide, you will see that the chronology obtained from some organics collected at the foundation and on the very first floor of this temple. And for this, we obtain a very clear late 9th century chronology, which is perfectly matching with the archaeological evidence we found during the excavation, for which are, for example, a certain number of fragmented sculptures and also, unfortunately, an unreadable black Misharada inscriptions. Okay, now, what to say about this small temple, which was found at the bottom, on the southern flank of the Barikot hill? Fire temple? Possibly, yes. It's now evident that this temple was built during the Shahi, Hindu Shahi phase, when the temple on the top was already, has been already established. The overall analysis of the material yielded by the excavation at the site is in progress, and it is really premature to advance any hypothesis on the nature of this temple. It is possible, though, that this temple was somehow connected to fire rituals. But in any case, we should remember that the archaeological evidence of this second temple should be placed in the cultural dynamics of these late phases, which are far more complex than we might possibly think. For example, in 2020, during the excavation which were made on the top where the water tank was built, we recorded the presence, the discovery of 2 small Buddhist tsatsa and pottery fragments with animal figurines with incised trishula, alongside with Islamic pottery materials. So these materials, which were, I mean, referring to 2 different non-Islamic cultural pictures, were found in layers associated to a majority of Islamic or Islamizing pottery material. This mixed evidence, Buddhist, Hindu, Islamic, far from being properly investigated, warn us against forgetting this minor evidence, which, despite their low number, can be relevant as other, and in order to reconstruct, maybe in future, a clear understanding of what was the cultural profile of this very difficult to understand period. Now, let's talk a little bit about the sculptural material found at Barikot. Now, one point should be addressed. This is one very important point from my point of view. Besides very few pieces, like the ones which were discovered at Khairkhana in the 30s, at Tepes Kandar by the Japanese in the 70s, and at Kafirkot by Abdurrahman and Michael Meister at the end of the last century, the fragments from Barikot are amongst the very few Shahi sculptures unearthed during regular diggings. Okay, so besides the Ghaznavids, which was part probably of a Vajira group, which was studied, we found also a leg of the Vishnu central life-size statue, were studied and presented in South Asian archaeology in Paris in 2005 by Anna Filigenzi. We discovered recently other fragments, like, for example, an almost complete male figures with folded arms, probably one of the 5 Pandavas, and a torso of a beautiful, torso, a portion of a torso of a male deity wearing a dhoti, tucked. And in 2020, besides other fragments, we found also another very small fragmentary head of the same dimension, of the same proportions of the Ghaznavids, which might possibly belong to the same sculptural group as the Ghaznavids, and it is possibly a Chakrapurusha. All the fragments discovered so far in the excavations possibly belong to 3 different figurative groups within the same Shahi class of marble materials. Each one is carved in different marble and in different material, different stylistic features. This is the Ghaznavids, for example. Sorry, this is the Pandava, which might have been part of an high relief like this from the Ogar, with under the reclining Vishnu. You see this is this is the 5 brothers, and this is Sahadeva, if I'm not wrong, which is possibly the identification of this sculpture. And then we have, I'm just noticed that it's almost 1 hour that I'm talking. I'm very sorry with all of you. I don't know, Alison, should I go ahead or should I make it shorter?
No, carry on. It's fine. I mean, you haven't got much more to go, have you? So please, you know, do. I think everyone would agree with me.
Okay, so I will make this description of the sculptural material very short. So we have this Pandava, which is interesting because the appearance of the statue is a bit grotesque, as only Shahi art can be, unwittingly be. The surface treatment is different, completely different from the Ghaznavids, with these deep grooves of the eye dress, heavy eyelids, and other execution, which makes this piece very close to the Tepeskandar sculpture. And then we have the standing Vishnu, which, I mean, it is a beautiful sculpture, sculptured in the round, by the way, which is pretty rare. For this, we have almost, I would say, almost a direct comparison with the fragmented male deity from Tagab in Kapisha, north from Kabul, northwest from Kabul, which is original. Its original height, considering the present dimension, would have been about 120 meters, so a little bit below the life size dimension. Apart from the dimensions, I would say nothing impedes to the identification of both sculptures, Tagab and Barikot, as coeval. They certainly belong to the same Shahi, Hindu Shahi period, sorry. Possibly a rare example of a beautiful standing Vishnu in the round. This is also interesting. The figurative palimpsest of the temples includes also this very important piece. It's in stucco, though not in marble. Amongst the stucco fragments recovered from the lime kiln were found another piece representing a male head, beardless, with elongated hair lobes and wearing, that's important, a jeweled 3-pointed crown. Interestingly, it shows traces of chiseling, indicated that it was violently detached, but most probably the marks were left unintentionally by a kiln operator. The object was found in the same context of the others, as the other discarded marble fragments within the lime kiln. What initially made the association of the image with the rest of the sculptural material quite uncomfortable, I would say, was that it recalled to many of us a bejeweled Buddha figure. Now, after a closer investigation, it is most probably evident, and I'm in agreement with Anna Filigenzi about that you can see here probably it has two ear plugs. So it's not a Buddha, it's a princely figure. So I'm pretty in agreement with Anna about that. This image represents not a Buddha, rather a local prince head. Let's go to okay, we have other fragments coming from the southern part of the hill. About the architecture, it would have taken too long to describe all the details although these details are still under consideration, under study, so maybe we can stop here. I will show you some of the slides just to conclude. And this is a comparison between, this might be important for you, a comparison between the podium of Zalamkot and the podium of Barikot. Zalamkot again, this is a view from the south. The elevation of Barikot and the elevation of one of the temples of excavated by Michael Meister Abdurrahman at Kafirkot. Sorry, this is again, this is something which is extremely, these are the images which were taken by Stein I think in 1906. Mm-hmm. And this is a picture of the local ziyarat, the graveyard at Ziyarat, where part of the materials originally from the temple of Gumbat were found. And there is also an interesting comparison, because in Chigasarai, which is a place not far from Gumbat, but in Afghanistan, Edelberg, but before him also the Hindukush German expedition, which was there in 1933 or 35, they found evidence in another temple, but the evidence of that temple were not found at the place, but like at Ziyarat, were found in a local graveyard. All the materials were reused for building the graves. Okay, and that's something which for me is one of the most important pieces we have, you have in British Museum, which is a beautiful carved pillar and the capital wooden from Kashmir's mast, which gives us a beautiful idea of probably how the pillars, how the capitals, the hybrid capitals of the partitions of the podia, both at Barikot and Zalamkot, probably looked. Okay, and that's all.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much. And I think we will now, if you could stop sharing the screen, and then perhaps we will take some questions. Great. Thank you. Now, do we have any questions on the chat? Nothing so far. So I will just start with one which I was just trying to sort of get my head around it. With the lime kiln that you mentioned, which was used, where they used the materials from the temple, was that during the Hindu Shahi period? Do you think it was much later, or?
Not much later. It was it was probably one of the reasons why there were two reasons for the Ghaznavids to occupy the top of the hill of Barikot. One was strategic. During the war against the Taliban, the Pakistan army established a station over there. So Barikot is strategic. You can control throughout the entire valley, the visible part of the Swat Valley. You can control the strategic passes leading to the south, Buner, Indus Valley, Lower Indus Valley. So it's a strategic place. So number one, strategic. In fact, we have military installations built by the Ghaznavids there. And we're talking, when we talk about the Ghaznavid, we talk about a massive invasion that occurred in the first decade of the 11th century. And we know it because they built a mosque at the place at Udegram. And we found graveyards with dated, with individuals, both at Barikot and Udegram, dated to 11th to 12th century. So there were early Islamic graveyards in Swat. So the Ghaznavids were there for two reasons. Number one was military occupation, strategic position of Barikot. The second one was the possibility of obtaining very easily lime, which in the Ghaznavid architecture is an important material. If you consider, for example, the material, the stucco material obtained, because lime is the base of stucco. The stucco of stucco architecture decoration from Ghazni, for example, in the Ghaznavid times, was extremely important. And we know for sure, I mean, for sure it's too much, but most probably this lime was exported, was not used in Swat. We do not have any trace, any evidence of lime in Udegram. stucco, sorry. Stucco. So there was two reasons. One was military, and the second was economic.
Okay. And I was going to say, your excavation recently on the Acropolis of the temple at the top is of really quite major significance. I mean, in terms of period, is that not the case?
From many point of view, because number one, because archaeology of this late period is almost neglected by many. I have only one colleague in Pakistan, Abdurrahman, and a few young people who are interested in that period. Cameron Petrie from Cambridge is now again interested in this very late period, but in the past was extremely in vogue, but now is in decline. But it is an important moment, because it's a moment which, number one, we have this Turkish Shahi. I show you a very important piece of information. It is the Yaguri rock inscription, which is going to be published by Nicholas Sims Williams in these days, most probably. That's a Turkish Shahi inscription written in Bactrian, found in Afghanistan, mentioning the son of probably that very Tegin Shah Khorasan, who was probably amongst, behind the early construction, in terms of chronology, I mean, the early construction of this temple in Barikot. So we have important investments, political investments, which are behind the construction of this boom of monumental architecture, which is a completely new thing. The second moment is the decline of Buddhism. So it's the moment really crucial for the history of the subcontinent. But not only, in a couple of centuries, we have the early arrival of Islam. So we have three situations which are, now to find the balance in order to understand what actually happened there. But it's also the moment when Buddhism started having this Vajrayana movement, which had a so deep influence over the Trans-Himalayan. So it's a moment when really something happened. So this is why I'm really happy about this excavation. I'm very happy that we started again excavating on that, on these periods.
Right. Well, we have a question. Thank you very much, Professor, for an enlightening lecture. I would like to know the tentative date when stupas, Buddhist monastic sites, came into state of disuse.
Okay.
Did you find any evidence?
To give an answer to this very interesting question, which is also the question I'm posing myself, until I will find a positive answer. We can give a negative answer. Okay, the negative answer is that when the temple was built, we can say end of the 8th, beginning of the 9th century. So let's say 790 to 820. So if you consider this as a possible, which is according to the archaeological evidence, radiocarbon dates, stratigraphic sequence, it's perfectly consistent with all these things. So we can say that this stupa should have been destroyed or razed down before that, of course, okay? Because we are going down. Now, if we go and we try to reach the last positive evidence we have evidence of Gandharan pieces. And archaeologically speaking, it's very important when you find something on the top of something, because if you find something at the bottom, it could have been fall down, of course. But if you find it on the top, that means that was there. It's a genuine place of, fine spot. Okay, I don't know if I make me understand myself.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So if we have Gandharan pieces which are dated 1 to 4th century, let's say 1 to 3rd century, okay, even if they were used 4th century, 5th century, okay, so we can say that the destruction of this temple, there were active Buddhist stupas there probably until the 4th, 5th century. If the only question we cannot give an answer because the evidence were completely obliterated by the construction of the temple, is if that these stupas were functioning at the moment when they were razed down.
Yeah.
This is the only question which, for the time being, we do not have absolutely no evidence to give a positive answer. To make things even more complicated is that not only you have these rock sculptures, which were, I mean, are indicating that there were some cults going on there. And from the other side, you have the evidence of this late pilgrimage, because we found that tsatsas, which are these small clay, unbaked clay stupas with these small tablets with the Buddhist creeds written in Brahmi inside, which were found amongst the debris of the Ghaznavid soldiers. So, believe me, Alison, we try to have, I mean, we believe in stratigraphic archaeology. So if I say that these layers belong to that period, it is because this is the reconstruction of the positive evidence. It's not just my ideas. It's based on sound facts. So you see, pictures of the general picture, I would say, seems to be far more complicated than what the fable convenu would have said. No, we have the Buddhists, then the Hindus' reaction, and then the Islam created a mess over there. Now, we have local people, because we made a genetic analysis of this. It was published in the journal Science in 2019. The local, the individuals buried in the early Islamic graveyards were local, were not immigrants, were not Turkic, of Turkic origin, were local. So we have local convertees. I don't know if English uses this term.
Yes, convert. Yes, absolutely.
And then we have still Buddhism going on in a very, very partly understandable way. In just 50 kilometers to the north, we have a boom of Buddhist investments, because this huge Jahanabad Buddha was the result of a huge economic investment, of course. So we have a very mixed situation. Plus, we have at the back a very strange fact that maybe this Lalia is extremely important to understand whether, for example, it causes or co-caused the decline of the Buddhist monasteries, because Buddhist monasteries were actually active in agricultural in the management of the agricultural product. Swat is one of the largest agro-production area in the ancient world for the entire region, because it's one of the very few places where you can have 2 crops in 1 year from one land. You have grain or barley in May and June. From the same land, you sow the field and plow the field and sow it, and you have rice in September.
Right, great, thank you. We have another question. If this site was used by all faiths, well, yes, are there any surviving stories as to the reason for the importance of the site?
This is a fantastic question. I would have given, I prepared some slides to answer to some exactly to that question. Let me summarize it in this way. Okay, there are many folk stories related to this castle, Barikot, hundreds of castles of Barikot. There are Easter stories in the folklore of the Pashto folklore, which is based on the local pre-Pashto folklore, folk tales, telling about fairy tales, kings and queens, and so on. But there is a very interesting historical fact. Barikot is one, okay? Barikot means the coat of Vajira. In Prakrit, ancient Prakrit, Beira. Veira is Vajra in Prakrit. The Prakrit is spoken in the area at the time of the, probably at the time of Alexander. So when Curtius Rufus says, Beira incole vocant, is reporting a direct eyewitness, I would say. So Beira is Vajra. The name is Vajra, okay? And the name is transformed into the local Beira, okay? When, let me remember the name, Stuart Hills Godfrey, a British colonel, captain, went to Panjkora in 1912. Panjkora is this nearby Swat. He found a village which was called Barikot, exactly like that Barikot, our Barikot.
Mm-hmm.
And he interviewed these people. He published a very important paper in the Geographical Journal, Journal of the Geographical Society, in 1912. Can be found in JSTOR, anyhow. He said that he interviewed the local people of this Barikot in the valley of Panjkora, which is like, I would say, 2 days marching, 2 days walk, 2 days walk distance from Barikot. So now you can go there and come back in the same day by car, of course. And they were saying that, yes, we call this our village Barikot because we were coming from that Barikot in Swat.
Mm-hmm.
And we were forced to leave the area by the Pashtuns when the Pashtuns invaded in 17th century, early 17th century probably, or during the 17th century. And they maintained the place name. Now, and the same story is Godfrey was able to collect the same story from the Pashtuns, Khans, from Barikot. They say, yes, when we arrived here, there were these people, they called themselves Baria, and they were under the leadership of a certain person, Baria Khan. Baria was the name of the tribe, Barikot, Vajra, Beri, the same name. And we forced them to live up in the mountain. I went there another time, a few months ago. And I made another interview, like Stuart Hill Godfrey. I sent 1 century, 100 years later. I asked to some elders, they told me, we moved, some of us in the early 19th century, during the 19th century, we moved to another Barikot, which is located in Afghanistan now, another 50 kilometers to the west. Why? Because it was an important marketplace. That Barikot became very famous because it was a battlefield between the Mujahideen and the Soviets, the Soviet army during the 80s. Some of these people migrated to Kabul during the 20th century, and they created a famous mohalla, a quarter there in Kabul, which is called Barikot. So the importance of the site, the sacredness of the site, is somehow testified by the longue durée of the place name. So we have at least 3 Barikot, and also a movie theater in Kabul, which is called Barikot. Generally, movie theaters are all like names like Ariana, Pamir, something like that. No, we have a movie theater Barikot, which was built or established by some of these Barikoti from strange story.
Right, that's very interesting. Right, we have one comment which I will forward on to, but we have one more question, and I think we will stop there. Did urban settlements differ by scale and type in this region? And what does your work reveal about the relationship between these religious structures and neighboring urban settlements?
Question that would probably can be, I need another hour to answer to that. I know the person who was posing this question. Many thanks to her, by the way. Now, the point is that maybe a kind of answer can be this. In mid-first millennium BCE, an agrarian colony was founded at Barikot, and it remained it was an urban center, a city. It remained as a city until the 4th century, when it was abandoned. But this moment, the 4th century AD, current era, was the moment where practically there was an urban crisis throughout northern India, northwest of India at least. Shaganderi was abandoned. Taxila was abandoned. Ulegram was abandoned. Also, Kwangsang says that practically the cities were almost negligible at that time. But the economy remain in function. And practically, you know, when there is a gap, there is a vacuum, someone should be able to take the place of. So the urban system collapsed, but the Buddhist monasteries remain in function and maintain the economy active. And they started having the pivotal role on the economy of agrarian economy of Swat. So practically, we can talk of religious structures vis-a-vis urban settlements only for a limited time, which is 800 years of the Swat cultural sequence, which is between the first mid-first millennium BCE, during more or less the Achaemenian times, just to give to put in a wider context, and the end of the Kushans, beginning of the early Kushano-Sasanian time. So from 500 BC to BCE to 300 to 400 maximum CE. So this is the moment when, and at the beginning, the city was the center and the rest was around. It was like the, kind of satellites. But during the late phases of the city itself, it is absolutely certain from the archaeological evidence that the monasteries were richer than the city. And they started buying plots in the city and transforming blocks into urban temples. And that happened during the 3rd century, which is a very important element in the I would say, the history of this archaeological stratigraphy of Barikot. The moment when the Buddhist communities started investing money and buying blocks and estates, I would say, or buildings in the city, within the city, and transforming them from residential into religious.
Right. Well, I think, thank you very much for answering all those questions. And I would just like to thank you on behalf of everyone for really.
I'm sorry if my English was not exactly the one you are used to, but I did my best.
No, your English was perfect. And the slide, it was fascinating, absolutely.
Thank you so much, very kind of you.
No, thank you. And as I remarked to Professor Olivieri about Edward Lear's poem, The Akund of Swat, and now I know a lot more about it. And I pronounced it wrong, Swat. So now I know a lot more about it. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Alison. Thank you to everyone. Have a good night.
I just have a private message that was sent to you, so I'm going to send you that. And so I will say good night to everybody, and I hope you will join us again for another RAS talk. So thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
We will just let people, there are the chat here. I'll see if we can save the chat. There's people thanking you and saying
thank you.
Really enjoyed it so much.